Hey everyone, Jerome here. Thanks for joining us for this episode of LifeTracks. Let me explain how this is going to work. The description of this video has links to the 5 songs we'll be talking about today. There will be certain parts of the podcast where we'll prompt you to listen to each of them. We recommend you listen to the songs when we do for the full effect. Speaking of songs, let's meet our guest for today who brought the music.
Hi, my name is Michael Cuke, and these are my life tracks.
We don't have a theme song, but if we did, that would be where it would go. But
This
okay.
would be a
Okay,
perfect time to bring in theme
I'll
song.
send you guys a song for the theme. It's by a guy I know.
Okay. No, that's cool. We can do
Okay.
that. We can do that. If you have something
No,
that
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I mean,
No, this is a perfect
dude.
place to jump in, actually. So Michael, I go way back with you now, and Jerome, I go way back with you, but you two don't know each other really at all, I don't think. Michael, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and who you're referencing when you say you got a song that we can play for the intro?
Okay, so um, currently, right now, I live in Michigan. I go to the good old seminary. So I'm in my second year there. And I mean, where I live in Michigan, a lot of time, I spend a lot of time inside because it gets really cold, a lot of snow, low temperatures. And I've always loved music. I've always liked like making music, especially rap, like freestyling since I was, like a teenager. But I never really like took it serious or publicly released stuff like that. But lately, especially like just being inside a lot, and also to add to that, I got injured, so I wasn't able to. I was really like kind of like immobile for a while, and so I started to like dig back into that hobby or that craft of like making music, and I started to actually release some of the old songs I make, the old songs I made onto Spotify, as well as make some new ones. So when I say I have a track for y'all to use, I'm really referencing myself. I have some music that's already out and some more that's coming. And it's kind of just under my name, except Michael. It says Mike, like Mike Cuke. So you could find me on anything. Shameless plug.
Look at that plug. Look at that. We could wrap it up here. I mean, we got
I'm
John
the
here.
sponsor of the episode.
Yeah, you better be giving us like $5 or something. Uh,
That's 5 more bucks
yeah.
than we've been making on this stuff, so I'm not complaining about that. Quickly before we get too far into talking about other music, while we're talking about your music, who are some artists or like producers that you would say you really like or you really draw inspiration from? Because you're not, I would imagine you're not just like only doing the lyrics and just like pulling the beats completely from elsewhere, right? Like, so who are your inspirations? Who are the people that you're trying to like steal from?
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to say this because it doesn't necessarily mirror the life tracks that I chose, but we'll get to that later. But the ones that inspired me, I would say first of all is J. Cole. Definitely, like I would put him at the top of the list. I would also say Kendrick Lamar and Chance the Rapper. Those are my big three. I know Kendrick doesn't like being part of the big three, but that's my
What
big
about
three.
Drake?
Nah, Drake. Even despite what my Spotify rap says, I'm not a fan of Drake. I don't know what happened there. I don't know how he made it on the list.
I mean,
You don't need to
you're the one
justify
who
yourself
makes
to us, man.
Spotify doesn't make the rap, it just gives it to you. Like you're the one who listens to the music and Spotify just says, "Hey, here's what you listen to." Like
The
unless
Canadian
you're
tax.
suggesting that Spotify is artificially inflating plays.
Ooh,
No, I can't
ooh.
suggest that because then that would be co-signing Drake's lawsuit. So I'm just gonna say like
Yeah.
maybe I was on shuffle play and I happened to accidentally listen to Drake a lot of times and I accidentally clicked a button and saved some of his songs. So don't know what happened
You are
there.
low key a secret Drake fan, and you just don't want to admit it. That's crazy.
I
Very
I want
secret.
to I want to be clear to anyone who's listening. If you are a Drake fan, please turn it off. I'm just kidding. It's fine. You know, no, it's funny because we'll get it. You say it doesn't reflect in your list, but Kendrick is on your list. Just maybe not a song that people. If you think, oh, this guy makes music and he likes Kendrick Lamar and he has a Kendrick Lamar song on his playlist, this is probably not the one that people would expect. But we'll get to that because the first song on this playlist is not at all a song that when you like the way you described yourself, and as I'm hearing that, because I have not heard a description of you like that before, and then I'm looking at the
Mhm.
list, I'm like, how did Iridescent by Linkin Park? What? Like, are you a big Linkin Park fan, or like, is there just something about this song in particular?
I only know that song and Um, those are the only two Linkin Park songs I know. So no, I'm not. Like I said, there's a whole story behind it, but it's really just that song.
But what's okay, so then if you're comfortable sharing, what is the story behind that? How did that happen?
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so I'll give the story, and just as like a disclaimer, we're gonna start kind of deep with this story because so like I said, I never really listened to Linkin Park like that much growing up. I feel like the only like rock group that I really listen to, if people still count them as rock, is Paramore. But like Paramore is the one rock band that is co-signed by all black people. We like Paramore. They're invited to every cookout. So Linkin Park was definitely not really on my list, but actually when I was an undergrad, I went through a lot of like mental health struggles. And I mean, it's still like an ongoing thing, but in that time specifically, like it reached like such a serious point that I ended up being in like one of those supervised like hospital wards where they have to like just keep you on the clock to when you're like suicidal and stuff like that. And it was like a really, kind of like a life-changing experience. It wasn't a place that I expected myself to be as like a senior and undergrad and things like that. And I remember just like being very resistant to everything and not really wanting to be there. I didn't feel like I belonged there. And one of the like it was like these mandatory like group therapy things we had to go to. And I went to it, and like I was just I was almost like determined, like I don't want to be here, but I'm just gonna get through it so I could check it off. So they'll like basically let me leave. And I remember for that particular session, the therapist that was leading it out, he was like, we're gonna listen to a song and we're just kind of going to talk about it. And that was the song that it was. And he hand printed out the lyrics and he gave it to everyone there. And we listened to that song. And I remember like it was the first time I heard the song. I knew the band Linkin Park, but that was the first time I heard the song. And I remember just like, prior to that, like I still loved music, but I feel like I listened to music up to that point mostly for like it just sounded good. Like if it hit, if it was, I would bump it. But at that point, I felt like that kind of like unlocked the idea of music becoming an outlet to express like feelings that otherwise is taboo or whatever. It's uncomfortable if I just like said to someone in a conversation. But when it's put in the art form of music, I realized how impactful it could be for me and for other people too. So that was really like a crucial moment. And when I was asked the question about the songs, like that immediately was the first one that came to my mind.
Is there a particular lyric or something that really stuck out to you from that song?
I think it's just mostly like in the chorus where it says, "Do you feel cold?" And I'm trying to remember. It's like, "Do you feel cold?" I had to sing it to
I got it
remember it.
pulled up. Do you
It's,
feel cold and lost in desperation? You build up hope, but failure's all you've known. Remember all the sadness and
Mhm.
frustration and let it go.
Let it go. Yeah. So that chorus, like, because they repeat it a couple of times, and I would just say that specifically, like I think also because up to that point, like I would mostly listen to Christian music to like help if I was feeling some type of like, you know, pain or whatever it was, or like mental anguish. And I think like Christian music definitely was helpful to a certain extent, but I noticed at least from my knowledge of Christian music at that time, now I've found like more diversity in that genre. But at that time, it was like really positive. Like it was like, you might be down, but God is here, and like the sun is gonna come out tomorrow, the type of vibe. And so
Yes,
when
the
I
classic Christian song, "The Sun is going to come out tomorrow."
yeah,
Bet your
yeah,
bottom
classic.
dollar that
You
tomorrow there'll
didn't
be
know
sunshine.
that Annie was a but yeah, so that was like the first time where it was just like it wasn't necessarily like a super hopeful song, but it was honest. And I realized that like I think that's the approach that I like. Like that's what I like to do with my art. And it's okay sometimes to just listen to a song that's just being honest about where I'm at instead of trying to
Mm,
talk about where I should be.
mm, mm. Yeah, that's good. Let's listen to the song now, unless Jerome, you had another question.
Nah, let's
And
do
then
it.
we'll
I
talk about
think at this point, if you haven't heard the song, we're talking a lot about it and you need to hear it. So let's listen to Iridescent by Linkin Park. Click the link in the description to listen to Iridescent by Linkin Park. That was Iridescent by Linkin Park. And I have to say, I like that song more than I thought I was going to when I first heard it. I truly did not expect to like it as much as I did.
And why is that, Jerome?
I don't know. It's kind of the way it started out. Like the song didn't go musically the direction I thought it was gonna go. But then like I really like songs that instead of doing like a build to the chorus and then they bring it back down and they build to the second chorus, like the whole song is really only building to one point. So I thought it was really cool that, oh, I was like, okay, they're gonna build to the chorus and they're gonna have a big chorus and they're gonna drop back down. And they just didn't do that. And so they're building and building and building, and then you have this like soaring electric guitar, and the payoff is well, I mean, that's not the ultimate payoff, but like right before the final like climax of the song, it's like the crowd singing behind that soaring guitar, singing that hook that they've introduced to the whole, and it's like this cool idea of the singer asking you, like, do you feel cold? And like you've built for hope, you build up hope, but failure is all you've known. But like by the end of the song, it's the audience who is now passing on the message that he passed to them. Like I just there's something cool about that. The idea that like he's telling you, and by the time you get to that point in the song, now you believe it and you're also telling other people. Like I thought that was cool.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I like what you were talking about, how it was building up. It gets to that point where you can almost feel in the song where there's a movement to let it go, right? You do feel this loneliness, this coldness, this desperation, whatever. And literally musically and just the way the whole song is crafted, it's that moment, that experience, that invitation to actually let things go. And yeah, I don't know. I think that's really powerful. Um, I'm a little offended that you said this is the only Linkin Park song you know or like or whatever. I have to say, obviously, I'm a bit older than you, but Hybrid Theory, their first album, is still a goated album. That was my gateway drug into all kinds of uh, other music that was really good and really deep that I really resounded with. So I love Linkin Park for what they did, and especially what you brought out, Michael. Chester Bennington, their singer, has always been he was always so raw. He was so transparent and honest with his music. And
Hmm.
you said that's something that really resounded with you. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about why you valued that honesty in the music as opposed to like some of the Christian contemporary music that might make you feel nice but didn't feel as real. Like, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I gotta check out more of their stuff because like I resonate with that song a lot. And like you said, especially the lead singer and even just thinking about, how he died by
Hmm.
suicide. There's actually a song like, and I'm not trying to plug my my songs again, but there is a song where I mentioned that. Like I mentioned about him and I think I think sometimes, for people who may not have experienced it, it sounds almost like scary to say like you relate to that. But I think for the person actually experiencing it, it's freeing to know that you're not the only person that feels this way, especially like I think in the cultural context that I grew up in. And to answer your question, Mello, about why I felt more drawn to this as opposed to like the regular contemporary Christian songs, is because I think with the Christian songs that I heard and that I would listen to, like a lot of them I would listen to, I just felt like it wasn't necessarily truly like speaking to my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think it was speaking to an experience that I'm supposed to be having. And so I would go to, different like church services, or I would just listen to on my own, and it would be encouraging, but it was always like I'm not here yet. So it would almost have the opposite effect because it would remind me of like this is not what I'm experiencing. Like some people's like, a lot of songs where they talk about going through difficult times, but it always has like a positive ending. And it's like, but what about for the people that haven't experienced that like silver lining yet? And so
Mm-hmm.
I think when I heard this song, it was one of those times where it's like, and for me, I think that's one of the things that makes music so special to me is I feel like I've never been the best person at necessarily, especially when it comes to like deep emotions, like explaining it and being someone who is able to talk about that like honestly and vulnerably. And I feel like music is what gave me that outlet. It almost is like music gave me a voice and taught me how to teach the language of honesty and
Mm.
vulnerability. And I think that song was definitely like one of the key, the catalyst behind my ability to do that.
Yeah, it's like the difference between the ideal, which is what is often brought out in like Christian pop radio type stuff, where this is the ideal. Yeah, I'm having a hard time, but God is good, right? But then there's the real sometimes where it's like, well, to be honest, I'm in a much harder place than that. And this gives voice to something that you're sensing, but oftentimes we feel very isolated, like we're the only ones going through it. And yeah, I think that's a really powerful song. You mentioned though that you used to listen to a lot of Christian music, and you know this was one of the first ones that really kind of opened the window. But the next song that we have, as far as I understand, is from a Christian artist, right? Madison Ryann Ward.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about her or how you came across this song.
Yeah. So when it comes to Madison Ryan Ward, who actually has been my on my Spotify Wrapped, my number one artist 2 years in a row. So if some way somehow she hears this, like you gotta send me a shirt or something. Like 2 years in a row is crazy.
I
But
can guarantee you that she will not hear this podcast. I can actually
There has never been a more sure guarantee than the guarantee James just guaranteed.
100% double down, triple down. She will not hear this podcast, bro.
okay, now all right, now it's my life's mission to make I'm about to send this to her DMs 3 times a day for life, forever.
Bro, I'll buy you the shirt if she hears it. If she admits that she
All
hears
right.
it, buy you two of her shirts.
Okay. All right, Jerome, what are you buying me?
I'm not buying you nothing. I'm not asking you to harass this poor woman. That's so rude. Please listen to
Dang,
this
dang.
podcast.
She's gonna block me. But
It's like, this is your favorite artist. You're gonna spam her DMs. You're gonna get blocked, dude. That's terrible. But how did
all
you
right, I didn't
find her?
think
Because
How you get,
because I was
that's
I
how you
was
get noticed.
I was looking and I was like, unless I'm just mistaken, she doesn't seem like she's like this huge artist. Like, how did you discover her? And you're saying that you're like one of her biggest fans. Like, so like what is this connection? How did this happen?
yeah, so and I'm actually wearing a mat and I swear this wasn't planned, but I'm wearing a shirt from her concert right here.
Bro, come on now. Come on
I put it on
That's a nice
everything.
shirt though. That's a nice
It
shirt.
No,
wasn't planned.
this is starting to give a little bit of Stan, like unhealthy
It
Stan,
was,
like
no, not a
what him and
stand. Not,
Kim Stan.
honestly, I'm only wearing it because it's cold and it's one of the few long sleeve shirts that I have.
Whatever. You
But
don't need to justify yourself to me, bro.
Look,
yeah,
it's
so
a
I
nice
was
shirt. You wear it if you want. It's
thank you.
fine.
I think Mello just wants one and he doesn't, so it's okay.
I want to point out that this is an audio podcast and not a visual podcast, so all of this means nothing to anyone else. So we have to take Jerome's word for it that it's a nice shirt.
Well, as
Yeah,
everyone who's
Jerome,
listening to this knows, Jerome has impeccable fashion sense, so
yes.
it'll be
Yes,
fine.
to the five friends that are listening to this right now.
This is no, this is the Esther check. This is the to see if Esther listens to this or not. Because if Esther listens to this, I'm gonna hear about it for sure.
Yeah, you will. All right, bro. Yeah, how did you hear about her? I know she's got a big online presence. Like I've come across her stuff on Instagram more than anything else. But
Mhm.
I actually don't know that much about her. So yeah, tell us
Yeah,
more
so
about her and the song.
the way I heard about her was actually through a mutual friend of me and Mello, whose name is Crystal. So Crystal would play her music a
The
lot
worst
back when
person I know.
and, and to be honest, I didn't like her like Madison Ryan Ward, not Crystal, but I didn't like Madison Ryan Ward's music when I first heard it. Like because like Crystal was really excited and would show me the music and stuff like that. And like I didn't think it was bad, but it wasn't really my speed. Like I don't know what it was, but and to this day, I still kind of feel like because even when she released another album, when I first listened to it, I was like, oh, I'm not really sure. So I feel like sometimes there's artists where it's like you got to listen to them multiple times. And I feel like that was so when I first heard her, I didn't really vibe with it. And I don't know what it was, but I randomly, and I think it probably was through Instagram or something, like heard one of her songs and I started listening to more of them. I was like, dang, like I really like this. And then it clicked. I was like, this is the artist that Crystal told me, but I couldn't give Crystal credit. So I just,
No,
pretend
please
like I
don't give her credit at all.
but yeah, so when I heard her, not only, but it wasn't only just that I heard it again. I was like, oh, this music is really nice. But it was also, like I said before, some of the Christian music that I heard before, it seemed very like it was that idealistic one. It was like something I couldn't relate to. But the way that her music is, especially like the song I mentioned, I felt like the feeling, it was the closest thing I had to the feeling that I had from the Linkin Park song, but from a Christian song. Like it sounded
Mm,
very honest, very relatable, and like, literally like the lyrics, like verbatim, it almost felt like, when you read something, it's like, oh, like, did they just read my mind? Like, that's exactly how I'm feeling. And so it was one of those things that opened my eyes to the other reality on the Christian side of things of like, you can still, even when it comes to like your faith, you can still use that honesty and vulnerability. And I found that, with the song I chose, but honestly, with a lot of her music and yeah.
mm. So yeah, I'm seeing the theme here, right? Authenticity in music is really important to you, and yeah, I think it's also good to. I'm glad you're bringing her song out because there are so many great artists that make Christian music or faith-based music. They don't get radio play. Like the radio play stuff is often very, very handpicked, right? It's a formula, and more power to the people who appreciate that. But to me, I'm kind of like you, where a lot of it doesn't come across, it doesn't connect with me very well.
Mhm.
But there's so many artists who are incredibly creative and real and raw and open about their lives and their perspective, their relationship with God, or how they're navigating it. But they're not getting radio play, so they have to be elevated in other ways. So I don't know, Jerome, why don't we listen to the song now, and then if you have any follow-up questions, we can throw that in afterwards.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's listen to The Same by Madison Ryan Ward. Check out the link in the description below to listen to The Same by Madison Ryan Ward. All right, that was The Same by Madison Ryan Ward. I really, it was hard for me to tell when I was listening. Like I shared initially, I wasn't sure if this was like a big artist or if it was a small artist and I was just confused or what. But I like how it has that feel like the production value is not like super, super high. I'm not saying that the production value is low, but the point is that it's made in a way to feel more raw and unplugged in a sense, Like I like that. I like that the music doesn't sound like something that was made in like a multi-million dollar studio. Like I don't know, there's something about that I think it makes it how you were saying. It's more relatable. It's like, oh, okay, like this
Yeah.
music is not so far removed from my reality.
True. Yeah, she has a really incredible voice too, and I think that's something I've always appreciated. As I think, unfortunately, Crystal probably introduced her to me as well. I don't want to give her credit either, but for the five people listening, just if you can set that part aside. But yeah, the voice quality that she has is really, really incredible. And actually, that's when I first heard her. I was like, why is she not more known? Because she has so much talent, and her song lyrics are really, really powerful.
Will you
So, can you tie this in? Because
sorry, but before
here.
we go big picture, there was something quickly while we're still talking about the track itself. Michael, you
Mhm.
mentioned that you've been to her live shows. Is she playing the guitar at those shows?
So I've been to just one of them when she came to Chicago, like um late last year, and I don't remember her playing the guitar. She may play, but I don't remember her in
Okay.
that
No,
show playing the
I
guitar.
was just curious because either like the song like it just conjured the image of like the person playing the guitar and singing because they have the she has a beautiful voice like James was saying. But did she do this song live? Like did you get to hear this song at the
No,
show?
she didn't. And the thing I've noticed is like and maybe you've seen it too, like with the list, like a lot of the artists that I like or like the songs that I like, they're kind of like what you're saying with Kendrick Lamar, like they're not necessarily their most known songs. And I feel like often the songs that I feel like sometimes, you know, have the most meaning, they don't get that popular because many people, not that there's necessarily something wrong with it, but like they listen to music like almost exclusively for how it sounds. Like if it does it sound good? Is it a vibe? And so if it makes you think too much, it's like, that's too complicated. So I don't know if this is a song that she'll ever play at her show because it's not one of the more popular ones. But I really like it, and it's probably my favorite one from the album.
No, it's a cool song. James,
So
what were you
can
gonna tie it
oh,
back in? Sorry.
sorry, didn't have to mute you there. Yeah, no, I wanted to compare the two. So the first song, Linkin Park, is coming from a place of somebody who's suffering, right? And then the sort of call to let it go. And then this song is coming very much more from an overtly faith-based perspective. Like I'm struggling, but you love me. Yeah, I know you're not going to give up on me. So I'm wondering, like, it sounds like these two are hitting two elements of your personality or your own journey. So I wanted to know if you could share a little bit more about what that looks like for you.
Yeah, no, I think you're definitely right with that about how it kind of shows like almost like that tension between just kind of like feeling like more pessimistic about whatever's going on or just being straight up like I don't have a silver lining versus kind of the other side of like, with God, you do have that element of faith and hope that's always there. The thing for me, why I like this one specifically and why kind of like what you were saying earlier, there's some artists that are just not known, but they're not cliche with how they like their approach to music and things like that. And what I like about this song is that if you really look at the lyrics, and that's why I like that we were able to see it, is like she's going about it from like a interrogative perspective. Like she's not saying, I have all the answers and I know you love me just the same. She's saying, help me too. And she's asking, like, how am I supposed to sleep in the storm? Like, how am I supposed to do this? And I feel like that's always been my approach because a lot of the common Christian songs I heard is more like declarative. It's like, I
Mm,
know in the storm I can sleep because Jesus is with me. Like, I was like,
mm,
how am in the storm am I supposed to sleep? Like,
mm,
and then it's not saying, I know you love me just the same. It's saying, help me to know that you just love me the same.
That is
And
a
so
lot
I
more
feel like for
meaningful.
me, that, yeah, it is. And it's always been, I think, my more natural, or I should say, like, honest approach to faith is like, I feel like more times than not, I don't have the answer. I more so have questions. And it's not like, it's not God, I know you're there as much as it's God, I hope you're there. Are you
mm,
there?
mm, mm. Yeah, so it's a little more of like a Job type of process, right? Or even David in the Psalms, where I mean, David just straight up said whatever he felt like saying, God, I really hope
Yeah.
you break the teeth of this dude. I hate him so much. Or, God, why are you abandoning me right now? I'm so flippin' depressed. Like some of the stuff was pretty emo, some of it was pretty metal, right? He probably had a few battle raps in there.
For real.
So yeah, honestly, just from my perspective, that's what I appreciate about the Bible itself is it is such a raw document, right? They didn't sugarcoat anything about the
Hmm.
history and about these other things, and it forces us to have to wrestle, right? Like we can make it very simple-minded, everything's good, blah blah blah, God is good, and that's but like if you really look at the documents that are in the Bible, these different stories, they're hard to wrestle with because they're about real people who made real decisions and were really trying to understand God in their context. And that's what I appreciate. And then what you're bringing out with this other side is this like sanitized Christianity. I think Lecrae calls it churchianity, right? This idea that we have to have everything kind of safe, and we want to make everything just as palatable as possible. And that's not real life, and it creates this challenge between this tension between what we know we're supposed to feel like according to what's presented to us versus how we actually are living in the world sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I really agree with that. And, I've said before, it might sound like funny or ironic, but it's like I can relate to the Bible, but it's hard for me to relate to Christianity
Mm,
because I think sometimes it's like they're at odds in the sense of this idea of, like whether you call it prosperity gospel or whatever, is that like, everything's always gonna be okay. Just be positive and smile your way through it. Like I don't necessarily think um like that seems to me like something that's come from Christianity, like from people more than it's actually come from the Bible. And it's not to say that, oh, the Bible's saying you're not going to be okay, but there was times in the Bible where people did not feel okay. and they felt like, like you were saying with David in Psalms 22, and he was like, why have you forsaken me?
Mm.
And there was other times in Psalms 23 when he was like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. But I think both of those times he was equally honest. And I think for you to honestly be able to say, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, first you have to honestly be able to say, my God, why have you forsaken me?
Mm. You have to have gone through the valley of the shadow of death, right? Before you can say,
Yeah.
He prepared a table before me in the presence of my enemies. It's part of the real life walk with God and seeking Him out.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, as someone who doesn't know you as well as James, you mentioned that you were a seminary student right now. Did you have the chance to work as a pastor before you went to seminary?
Not as a pastor, but still in ministry. I was a chaplain at an
Okay.
academy.
Okay. So how did you feel about working? Because you were talking about like relating to the Bible, but not relating to Christianity. And for the record, working as a chaplain is, in most senses, way more difficult than whatever your classmates had to do before they went to seminary. So don't let anybody try and tell you anything about like, oh, you weren't a pastor. Like, don't let me not get
Mm.
started on that. But
Nah, thank you, bro. Keep going, keep
no,
going.
it's just how should I say? It's stupid and people try to like people because humans at their core have a tendency to try and look for ways to pick themselves up and push other people down, right? So at seminary, that tendency comes out by people trying to like gatekeep of like, oh well, you didn't really do this or you didn't really so like. But
Mm.
that aside, I will step off of my soapbox and continue
That's
asking
for
the
the other
question.
podcast.
Oh no, but yeah, no, it's okay, okay. Sorry. What's up, James?
I just wanted to clarify for anyone who does stumble upon this and doesn't know us directly. We're talking about Andrews Seminary because all three of us have been through that seminary or are currently enrolled. So that's it's in Michigan, and that's the one that we keep referencing. Wow, words. We keep referring back to, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
As
just for clarity.
all of us are Seventh-day Adventist ministers in some capacity. And Michael, you were talking about how what you did before you went to grad school was that you were a chaplain. James actually mentioned that you were a chaplain at Atlanta Adventist Academy. But just as you were talking about relating to the Bible, but not really relating to Christianity, how did you deal with those feelings while you were working for the Christian church? I mean, obviously, the Adventist church is a subset of Christianity and so forth. But it's not like the Adventist church doesn't have the problems you were describing when it comes to relating to the Bible, but not relating to Christianity. So how did
Mhm.
that go where you were like, okay, I have to work in this environment as part of this larger thing that I don't necessarily relate to, but my work for this entity is about the Bible, which I feel
Yeah.
like is not always in agreement with the entity that I'm working with. Like how did you find that balance? How did that go for you?
Yeah, I mean, first I'll say like it was hard to do. And I would say like there were some times where I handled it better than others. Like some days I felt like I was definitely like in alignment with that idea of, I'm ultimately doing this for God and like I'm teaching the Bible or the gospel and not necessarily an agenda of a denomination. And other times, especially because that was like my first like big boy ministry job, like there was times where I felt pressured of like, oh, like, if I do this thing that's in line with the institution, then I know I'll be more liked or I'll be more accepted or I'll be more approved by, the higher ups or whatever. But overall, I feel like the thing that helped me to stay grounded is I looked at, and this is one of the reasons why, I liked working in that field and why to a certain extent I still feel called when it comes to that age group, like the teenagers, is because when I was a teenager, I feel like and it's not necessarily any shade to Adventism, but just in my personal upbringing, I didn't feel like I felt like being in the churches I was in, because my dad was a pastor, so I was in multiple churches, like I was on my way out of the church and away from God, maybe permanently. And I feel like the thing that helped me the most was when I started to read the Bible for myself, and I realized how much of a difference there was between the Bible and what I heard at church. Like I literally to this day remember when I read Romans 8 for the first time, and that was the first time I ever heard that nothing could separate you from the love of God. Like I
Mm.
heard that God loves you in church, but it always felt, even if it wasn't explicitly said, like it was conditional. Like God loves you if you don't have sex before marriage. God loves you if you keep the Sabbath. But this was the first time where I was like, nothing will separate you from the love of God. And verses like where sin is, grace abounds all the more. And even reading in Ephesians about how we're saved by grace through faith and not by works. So nobody could brag about it. And I was like, whoa, like this is way different. Because for me, it felt very like the faith that I grew up in was very works based. That's at least what it felt like. Even if I was
Transactional.
young and yeah, exactly. It was like, okay, if I keep the Sabbath, if I go to church, if I reverence the sanctuary, if I don't eat unclean meat, etc., then it's like I'll be in a good position. And so, but when I saw the difference of like the actual what the Bible's actually saying versus what people saying about the Bible, it really helped me. And I wanted to give that experience to the kids that I worked with, especially because I saw myself in a lot of them. Like I saw the same struggles I had. And if anything, a lot of them were braver than me because they would be more honest. Like I was afraid to say some things at that age, but they would be honest with their questions and when they said where they're at with their faith. And so that was one of the things that would really help me. Well, first of all, like, remind myself, but I would also tell the students, like, I'm not here to make you Adventist or to make you like religious or anything like that. Like I'm teaching you the Bible. And I would even tell them, like, God forbid if something ever happens, like I become, not Christian or I go atheist or whatever it is, like I just want you to know, like I'm not teaching you Michael's agenda. I'm not teaching you, something that is my opinion. Like I'm just trying to really teach you what's from the Bible so that like regardless of what people's telling you in the church, regardless of like what my life looks like or anything like that, like this is directly from the source. Because at the end of the day, like a lot of people have different opinions and different interpretations, but the thing that helped me the most was seeing it for myself right there.
Mm. Yeah, so you brought up how the way you were raised up, Jerome used the word transactional. It was a transactional religion, or maybe it was, another way to put it would be like it was really just based on you trying to be good enough for God to love you fully, right? Like I like that's kind of what you're describing.
Hmm.
And what happens a lot of times is if we feel like the standards that we've been called to are like way above us, and then we're way down here and we're not meeting those standards, we get to these places of hopelessness. We get to these places where we are really, yeah, having a hard time handling. We can get to the point where we even feel like God hates us.
Mm.
And I've sat with many youth who have had those, not just youth, but many people who have had those experiences and feel hopeless because of it. And I think that actually sets up nicely the next song, which is a heavy song and a good song at the same time. We've been having this conversation about authenticity in music and how much you value that. And it also sounds like you just value authenticity in general. And
Mhm.
so this song, can you tell us a little bit about this song by Logic, which was the next one on your list?
Yeah, so this song is definitely really correlated to the first song for me. I kind of discovered these songs. Well, I knew the Logic one beforehand because it came out, I think, when I was still like maybe like a senior in high school. But um it was definitely within that same time frame where I was discovering this outlet of music to because like the way I was raised, mental health, anything like wasn't talked about. There was no like I've never heard any like person say that they were depressed out loud or publicly or anything like that outside of like a joking context or misusing it like I lost a basketball game and I was depressed or something like that. Like I never heard it really spoken about like as a diagnosis. And so I felt feelings like that or I had experiences like that when I was in high school, maybe even like a little bit younger and up until college. And like I said, I heard this song before by Logic, but I didn't really relate to it in the same way until I was really going through it. And one of the things that makes this song extra special is I knew this number that the song is titled after because of the song. Like that's why I knew the number. And I ended up using that number and that, helped me a lot on that. And that was probably like the catalyst even before the whole experience with the Linkin Park song. Like that was probably the catalyst that really helped me to be the first person in my family and the first person in my circle to ever like really try to get professional help for my mental health. But it started off with literally like I had that number memorized because of the song, and now they made the number shorter. It's 988, so it's easier. But I remember like even
I actually wrote that down. I was like, if this song came out now, it would be titled 988, and
yeah,
that would probably be a
yeah,
little more catchy because I was looking at this number and this song came out a long time ago. I was like, man, that's a
yeah,
long number to have to remember. But clearly you did. Like you're saying, you actually
yeah.
remembered it from the title.
Yeah, and I did, and I used it. And I remember thinking, because I was just like, I didn't really necessarily like vibe with the idea of calling this number and talking to strangers about how I'm feeling and like these strong feelings or whatever. And then I just thought like if he made a whole entire song about this, then maybe it
Mm,
has to have some type of use.
mm.
Like he made a whole entire song, and this song has so many plays, like I might as well try.
What would you say to somebody now who might be in those places, like they're struggling, and it's actually probably a bit deeper than they want to admit, or that they have shared with other people, or maybe they're in a family or environment where mental health is not a real thing, like you're describing. Like, what would you actually tell somebody who is thinking about, well, I think I need to talk to somebody, but I'm a little afraid to do this whole 988 thing or whatever?
Hmm. I mean, I don't know who it is that's like the originator of this quote because I've heard it before on a podcast or something, but it's someone who said, "Do it afraid." And
Mm,
I feel like for me, that's kind of like I was still skeptical about using that number and calling it, and I still did it. And I was skeptical
mm,
probably during most of the phone call, and I still did it, and it led me to things that I was more comfortable with and that fit me. Like I wouldn't say I called that number a whole bunch of different times, but it was kind of like the thing that initiated me being able to find other resources that probably fit me better. And so I feel like that's probably what I would tell them is like, you don't have to be 100% comfortable to do it. I mean, you're probably already uncomfortable with the feelings that you have, anyways. And so I think it's worth the try. I think I was at that point where I was like, I'll try anything. And it was something where it wasn't like this magic pill that made everything better. But I feel like it was that point that started that transition to me actually getting help and actually finding things that work for me and just ultimately like it's for you and it's about you. I know some people's like, in my family, I'm not used to this or culturally, or you don't want to appear weak or you don't want to appear like crazy or whatever. And that was, you know, and just to even, I guess, make it more personal, like going back to the first song when I said I was actually in that like hospital when we went over that song, there was one experience where there were like it was like nursing students who would come from different universities and they were doing their clinicals on like the psych ward that we were on. And it was like from these random schools. But there was one time where like they would wake you up and take your vitals, and one of the nurses, like their scrubs looked familiar. And I'm like, why do these look familiar? But I'm still kind of asleep. And then when I like really like got the crust out my eyes and really looked, I saw the Andrews logo. And so these were students from Andrews that were doing this. And I remember feeling like so embarrassed and scared. And then we had to go to like one of the group's therapy sessions. And I even
mm,
told like the staff that I didn't feel comfortable. And they were like, oh, well, like, you don't have to go if you don't feel comfortable. And if you do go, like, we'll take you out the attire that they give you and we'll give you like some regular clothes, blah, blah, just trying to make you seem. And then I remember having this moment where I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna go and I'm not gonna pretend like I'm okay. Like I'm here because I need help. And it
mm,
was to this day one of the most awkward, uncomfortable experiences where I was sitting. There was one of the nursing students there. I was his RA. There was another nursing student where I was on the basketball team with her boyfriend.
mm,
Like it was just it, and I was thinking about what if people talk about me, whatever it was. But I felt like that was like a crucial moment of realizing like people can say what they want. I'm here
mm,
because I need help. And maybe other people, if they see me and they're like, yo, my RA did this, or my boyfriend's teammate did this, like maybe it can lead them to do it too. So I would say like it's about you. And if you're stopping yourself from getting help or getting support you need because of what other people will think. Like, I just think that's not fair to you.
yeah, yeah. Man, that's good. When people step out in courage when they're afraid, it gives other people permission to do the same thing. And that's kind of what you're talking about. And so by allowing yourself to be awkward and to be afraid and still doing what needed to be done, yeah, not only did it help you, but who knows who else it might help in the future as well. Let's kick off the song.
This is 1-800-273-8255 by Logic. Click the link in the description to listen to 1-800-273-8255 by Logic. That was 1-800-273-8255 by Logic. I remember the first time I heard this song, it was actually a live version of it. He did this song at an award show. I can't remember which award show it was, but it was really special because he did this song live, and I think I'm saying her name right, Alessia Cara. I might not be saying that right, but he had her come out, and then he had Khalid, or again, I don't know if I'm saying his name right or not, but he had Khalid come out at the end as well. And I remember it was so like bizarre because it was an award show, so everybody's showing out and they have the really nice stage, and like all three of them can actually sing it live. Like that makes a huge difference because of course that's not always the case, but all three of them killed it. And I'm like, this is a song about wanting to die. Like there was something really like bizarrely powerful about this idea of like being at an award show and everyone being dressed really nice and being really happy and like smile for the cameras and all, but those same people are singing about how they want to die. Like they do not want to be alive right now. And I think the point is that not everybody can be Logic to sing at the award show and sing about how they want to die. Not everyone can be Khalid or Alicia Cara to do that, right? And maybe not everyone can be you to go to the group therapy session and meet your meet the student in the dorm that you're responsible for, or your teammate's girlfriend or whatever, right? But everyone can do something, and whatever little things you do for your mental health, like yes, you're doing it for you, but like no one lives in a vacuum. So whatever you do for your mental health, like if it makes you a slightly better person today than you were yesterday, like that impacts the people around you too. Like when you help yourself with mental health, like you're not just helping yourself, like you're helping everybody that you touch. And for me, I think like that's been something that I've had to wrestle with because like there have been times where like I've been miserable and I'm one of those people who kind of like wallows in their misery. But like I had this moment of realization where it was like I am actively making my wife's life worse by choosing not to try and do something. By me being my by me choosing not to act because I don't want to or because it'll be hard or because it'll hurt. Every day that I don't choose to do that, I am hurting the person I love who is living with me and is having to deal with me rattling around the apartment, like refusing to address their mental issues, right?
To go along with what you just said about wallowing, Jerome, but also with that first song, with Linkin Park, like the reality is Chester died, right? And that was actually the most heartbreaking of when we talk about celebrity deaths. That one hit me the hardest because he was a big part of my life at a really formative time, right? And now you just brought out Jerome, like they're singing on stage about "I want to die," right? Which is not the whole point of the song, of course, but they are saying those things out loud. And there is an argument that people make, and I'll hear what you think, Michael, about this. Right? Like, why do we want to stay in these dark places? Why should we be listening to songs with like dark subject matter or that doesn't lead us to that happy-go-lucky Christian pop thing we were talking about earlier? You know, is it making it worse by having these songs and then just listening to these sad songs? Do we end up wallowing because of it? um, or is it a positive thing? So like, how do you navigate that? Especially, right? We're in ministry, so we're people who are trying to point people to faith and to God and to good things. And yet these are really raw songs, and my songs were as well. If you listen to my podcast, so why or how do you justify, I guess, listening to some of these harder things,
Yeah.
um, and not let it be just a wallowing experience.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a really good question. It's something that I've thought about. And even like some songs I recorded years ago, but I just finally put them out. And they were like similar to some of the other songs that we've heard here with the content and talking about how I was feeling and suicidal thoughts and things like that. And I remember like less than 24 hours after posting it, I got an email from the counseling and testing center at Andrews doing like a wellness check. And they were like, yeah, like there was someone who basically, I forgot what it's called, but it's like when you submit like a form to say you're concerned, and
Mhm.
and literally they put in the thing like the student or whoever it was put like, this is a cry for help, please
Mhm.
check on this person, you could
Mhm.
save a life.
Mhm.
And I can't completely, you know fault the person whoever reported that for doing that, because even with me looking back at the songs that I wrote, they are like, and just like the one with Logic, like if you, especially if you just hear that first part where it's like, I don't want to be alive, I don't want, like he's just repeating that. It's very alarming. And so to answer the question about how I justify it, I think for me, well, I guess there's a couple things. The first thing is that there are some people that genuinely feel like that, even if it's uncomfortable, even if, it's not something that's highlighted, there's people that feel like that. And I think one of the things it does is it makes people know that they're not the only person that feels like that. I think
Mhm.
another thing that's so important too, along those same lines, is that there was a therapist who told me before, what's shareable is bearable. And I think sometimes Mel said it probably was, I don't even know.
That's
But
100% something I say all the time. But yeah, I'm not going to take
yeah,
credit, but it was definitely me.
it was James Mello. But and I think that's really true. I think sometimes we get, and I would even tell my students this when it came to the Bible, is like a lot of people in the church sometimes think that doubt, like talking about your doubts and skepticism, is toxic to the faith. But I think what's more toxic is silence. And you feel these
Mm.
things, but you never. I think in the same way, like, yes, I think it's okay to have some level of concern with hearing this. But what's even more concerning is all the people that feel like that and they're not saying anything.
Mm. Mm.
And so I think at least when someone's speaking about it, like, because there's so many people, especially men, where they die by suicide or they're going through mental health issues and nobody knows about it because they're
Mm.
not talking about it. So at least when someone's talking about it, I think one, it helps when you talk about things, when you journal, when you express, when you put in the music, it helps you cope and deal with those feelings. And then two, it raises awareness so people can at least know, wow, this person's going through this.
Yeah. Yeah, we could call that toxic positivity, right? Where we have to, due to our faith or due to our belief about like just being positive people, we have to always pretend everything is okay, even when it's not. And that actually just puts a mask on and it makes the suffering worse. People also have this idea that if I ask somebody if they want to die by suicide, right, like that's going to implant the idea. But studies have repeatedly shown that even in asking the question, we're helping to relieve the suffering because now we're sharing the burden with that person and they're not so alone. And oftentimes, when we're in these places of deep depression or thoughts of suicide, we are isolating entirely. We're feeling like we are the only ones suffering. So that sounds like what you're saying here. This is giving voice to people who otherwise don't feel seen or heard. They feel entirely in their own box
Hmm.
and stuck there. And having these songs, it's not like it's creating a reality, it's just naming a reality that is not that is shared by more than one person. And
Yeah.
yes, it doesn't prevent people from making drastic decisions, but it can actually be a source of healing and not just a source of evil, like some people would have it be. Well, let's switch gears here. It's
How'd
a
you feel about the
good.
halftime show?
Oh my goodness.
We would need a whole other episode to talk about that.
No, I was like, how are we gonna switch gears? Because the next song is by Kendrick Lamar, and like it's almost impossible to have a Kendrick Lamar conversation right now without talking about like all the stuff that's going on surrounding him.
Yeah.
Well, you've really dated this podcast, Jerome. Thanks. This is no longer timeless, but that's
I'm
all
sorry.
right. We'll
To the, all right,
we'll focus on
to the
this.
time travelers who are listening,
2025.
yeah, to the time travelers
Yeah.
who are listening, Kendrick Lamar
Thank,
has staked his claim on the throne as the
dude,
greatest rapper in the game.
when this podcast blows up in 2028 or 2029, now they're gonna have to figure out what halftime show we're even talking about. So
For real.
thanks, man.
Like, there's not even going to be a halftime anymore. They canceled it.
I mean,
They'll be doing quarter
to be
times.
fair, you say that, but like there are people who are legitimately saying that this is like one of the greatest halftime shows that was ever done. So if those people are correct, then it won't be difficult to go back and find what Kendrick Lamar did.
Well, well, my
Yeah.
my grumpy Facebook friends wearing Oakleys in their profile pictures all told me this was the worst halftime show ever. So I don't know.
Yeah, I saw that. I I think I loved Kendrick's halftime show, but you know, I'm always going to be a big fan of Shakira and J-Lo's halftime show.
Oh, with
And
the okay, I'm not even gonna go into that one
I
yet.
don't think I'm allowed to say on a hot mic why I like the
yeah,
halftime show, so I'm just not gonna say anything.
yeah. I'm the only single one to
I'm not
say
even gonna weigh in on that. I don't even know which halftime show you guys are
And
talking about.
So what
I don't know
halftime?
who Shakira or J-Lo are.
Yeah,
I
who
don't
is
know.
Shakira?
I've never heard of these people. Whoever they are, I'm sure they're very talented.
Very
Um,
nice people.
but the thing for me that I thought was funny with like my favorite part of the halftime show was all the memes of like Kendrick smiling, where it's like
Yeah.
me,
Hey Drake.
like me to my dog. Please be normal and stop eating that. My dog. And it's like the picture of him, like
Yeah.
smiling at the camera, like, I'm gonna do it. It's just like all the
Yeah.
memes of him smiling at the camera like a child, like, I'm gonna do the thing I'm not supposed to do. I thought those are like the
Yeah,
greatest.
he hit that camera mark perfectly. He
Yeah.
really, really did. I'll say that. And I will go on record and say that I personally thought this halftime show was a piece of art. And I really appreciated that there was a lot of different things happening at the same time. And especially if you follow, any of the hip hop culture and background, there's just so much interesting stuff that was taking place there. But that's not the song. I don't think this song was even on the halftime show.
Yeah.
So I know that rap is a big part of your life and has been for sounds like a really long time.
Hmm.
You narrowed it down pretty much to the Logic song we just talked about and to this Kendrick song. So why Kendrick and why this song?
Hmm. Yeah, so it was hard to just making this list in general. But I knew that this was a song, like one, I knew Kendrick would make the list. And this song specifically, like there's a lot of songs that I can relate to or I just hear it and I like it. But this one I think definitely hit me like on a deep level because I was really narrowing on that word when you asked the question about the song meaningful. And
Mm,
like this whole album, I remember listening to this album when it first came out, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers in 2022. And I remember when I listened to it through, like it didn't even feel like I was listening to an album. It felt like I was like, I don't even know, like at a museum and I was going through like an exhibit or something.
mm,
Like it was really, and I think, especially in the genre of rap, at least for me, like I didn't experience anything like that at that point. Like the topics that he touched on, and it was new, and it was seeing like that's why like there's some Christian songs I had, and there's some rock songs where these other genres I felt like they talked about these emotional, heavy topics, and to see it being brought to the rap stage where I feel like that's one of the biggest places where it's like, nah, you gotta have a certain type of persona and you gotta, have a certain type of confidence about you. So to speak about these vulnerable things, it was especially from someone like Kendrick Lamar. And then in this
mm.
song specifically, like I think this was out of the whole album, the one that I just related a lot to the message. There's especially a lyric in there where he says, anytime I couldn't find God, I still could find myself in a song.
Mm.
And I think that was one that really stood out to me because that's how I felt. Like I felt like There was times where I didn't necessarily like, God, where are you? Or times when I was at my lowest of lows, I felt like through the music, it was almost like that was like my lifeline. And just in general, like as we listened to the song, it had that same effect as like The Same or the Logic song or the Linkin Park song, where it was like, as I'm hearing these lyrics, it's like, wow, like this sounds so relatable. And to hear it come from a rapper, it was just very like, it was freeing for me.
Why don't
Mm,
we do this?
mm.
Because there's a very good chance that there are Kendrick Lamar fans hearing this who cannot recall the song, or regular music fans who maybe aren't the biggest Kendrick listeners who have never heard this song at all. Because, like you said, this is not necessarily a song that's like super well known. This is Count Me Out by Kendrick Lamar. Why don't we listen to it now? Check out the link in the description to listen to Count Me Out by Kendrick Lamar. That was Count Me Out by Kendrick Lamar. That's definitely not the version of the song I listened to in preparation for this podcast. And that was really intense. I liked like how you said, the almost uncomfortably, like, not weak, but like almost like the flawed way he's describing himself. He's describing himself as someone who's making mistakes, having regrets, doing things that maybe he shouldn't be doing, instead of talking about like how he's on top of the world, how he's untouchable, how he's the best, how he's the baddest. And it's refreshing because it's much more relatable. Like, I am not the best, I am not the baddest, I am not untouchable, but I do have regrets, and I do have things in my life that I've messed up that I look back on and I'm like, that was my fault. Like, there is no one else to blame. Like, that was me. So I think it's really empowering to have, like you were saying, someone like make this museum exhibit, and then you go in there and the artist is like, no, I'm just like you. Like, I've done things horribly wrong.
Mm.
Yeah, so you said you really related to this song especially. So I mean, what about it is relatable for you, Michael?
I mean, it's a lot of different layers that I feel like I could definitely relate to. But I feel like the overall concept, like even this idea, like I remember when I first heard it and it was like, I love when you count me out. I'm like, why would I want to be counted out? Like, I don't love when you do that. I want you to to actually support me. But I feel like in the way that he's expressing it, like it's almost like sarcastic, right? Or it's almost like, yeah, like in the song he's implying like, oh, I love when you count me out. But in reality, that's not how we really feel. Like it's like that's the coping mechanism that we use to make it so it doesn't hurt as much when we're rejected. And so that's why you can see like a lot of the lyrics, it doesn't actually reflect that. And so I think that part, just that whole concept, and I feel like that's really um layered like throughout this song and throughout the album. And what you were saying, Jerome, about how, to hear this song and you go into the museum exhibit and it's not him necessarily flexing, but almost doing the opposite, like showing scars, showing vulnerability. Like for me, that was definitely something that was really compelling. I'm thinking of one of the lyrics where he says, if all else fails, I was myself.
Mm,
And then there's another one where he says, but a mask won't hide who you are inside. And that was even more relevant at the time because I was still a little bit closer to like the pandemic era. And in another song on that album, Kendrick says, I'm not your savior. And I feel like all these are kind of like, intertwined within each other of this idea of like, especially coming off the album that he made prior to that was like really big album of the year, Kendrick's on top. And then boom, everybody was surprised. And to this day, it's a lot of people that even though this album won rap album of the year, that still look at this as like, this was a terrible album. What was he doing? Like, but I feel like for me, this was the one that, hit me the most to hear the way I feel, him talking about regret, him talking about being a people pleaser. Like you're a multi-million-dollar rapper and you're talking about you please everyone but yourself. Like you feel human emotions too. Like it's crazy. And so for me, like those were some of the things that really hit me with this song.
mm.
Would you
Yeah,
say would you
I
say
remember.
that Sorry, there's just something that as Michael was saying, there's something that I really just wanted to ask. Would you say that when you write, because I haven't heard any of your music, would you say that when you write, you try to do that as well? Like, how try to channel maybe some of the same energy of like just putting who you are out there? Like, do you have any songs where you try to be like big and bad and cool, or are you more like rapping about like this sort of thing? Because I haven't heard any of your music, so I'm just curious. Like, are you writing more like the Kendrick from Mr. Morale, or are you writing more like the Kendrick who's talking
Like the
about it's just
next
Big
one.
Me?
Yeah. No, I'm definitely more of like the Mr. Morale Kendrick type. In fact, like I've tried that route before of just trying like let me just spit some bars and just flex. And I don't know what it is, but I become a significantly worse rapper. Like I become a Dr. Seuss Cat in the Hat rapper if I try to do that. It's just so like I feel like the thing that like the any skill that I have in rap, it's like fueled by the authenticity. And if I try to veer off that, I can't do it anymore. And so I feel like, and sometimes I'm even hesitant to put out certain songs because I feel like it's literally like a freaking like Olivia Rodrigo lyrics dressed in a rap beat. Like I'm just like literally like the song that's coming out on Friday is literally called Overdue Tears. Like so like I feel sometimes like, oh, I don't know if I fit in the genre, but when I think about, like songs like this, and also when I think about like when you think about the history of rap in general, it wasn't necessarily based on like some of the stuff we see now, like, oh, you gotta have a nice car and you gotta flex and you gotta talk about drugs and sex, blah, blah. It was based on authenticity and being real. And if real for you is sex and cars and drugs, well, then that's being authentic to rap. And if real for you is the stuff I'm talking about. So that's what it is. Like maybe if I do get to that point where my income is more than the stipend I get at seminary, I might have to flex or something. But right now I feel like all my music so far has reflected like where I'm at. Like I think you really could get to know me deeper just from listening to my songs, and I hope it stays that way.
That's cool. Sorry,
Bro,
James.
please
I
don't
I
try to
didn't.
be a flex rapper. Please don't. Please don't. It's not gonna work for you, bro. It's not gonna work.
I mean, I think you could do it, but if you feel like you turned into Dr. Seuss, then I understand why you
No,
might not want to do
I
that.
could absolutely see that. I've never heard any of the bars where you're trying to flex like that, but I already know.
Because I didn't
Like
post them. I didn't publicize
bro,
them.
I would not be gassing you up like I do right now if that was the direction you were trying to go.
He like
Um,
he like sat down and looked at it. I do not like a green exit. Okay, we can't use that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, James. I was really interested to ask that. But what were you gonna ask before I started talking about
yeah, well,
it?
I've been fuming ever since you said that, but I will work on forgiving you. You know, there was a couple things. First of all, I remember I had somebody who had me sit down and listen through the whole album. And I hadn't, I really went in completely blind, and I was really impressed with the vulnerability in the tracks. In fact, I have the one that really stood out to me from that album was Mother I Sober, which is a heavy track, bro. And those are the ones that really stand out to me a lot of times too. Just when people are talking about real stuff in their own way and how they're processing it, even if I don't agree with them, I appreciate like an attempt at authenticity, especially when so much of our world is about formula and mask and pretending. And we do that in the church, we do that in the world, we do that, image is everything. So when people are less about image and more just about introspection, I really respect that. Um, I wanted to just throw this random question out there because I am curious. You know, you're at seminary, you've studied for ministry, you've been in ministry before. Your world might take you back into paid ministry at some point. Like, what do you say to people who are very uncomfortable with listening to music with like explicit lyrics and those types of things? Because obviously this could be a shocking track. Oh, what kind of pastor listens to something like this? How do you approach that, or why are you okay with it when maybe some other people might not be comfortable with it?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I think like the first thing is if somebody does feel that way, I don't necessarily think that's like inherently a bad feeling to have. Like I understand if it's something that makes you uncomfortable or you question it. And for a lot of my life, I did. I even remember with me and my brother getting in a fight before because he was listening to Kanye West in the car. And I was like, bro, you can't listen to Kanye West. He's in the
I
Illuminati.
mean, you were right though. You were right though. You probably don't want him to be listening to Kanye West in the car right now.
Yeah,
So
see, I was ahead of my time.
you were.
Bro, you were
But
so far ahead of your time.
I'm telling you, man, this
but
dude's
yes,
crazy. You don't get involved with this guy.
yes, yeah, it's something I just knew something back then. But yeah, but I think for me, I really look at music and I think it's an art form, right? And something I found really interesting is I think just even if you look at it from an entertainment perspective, I have friends too, like in the seminary who will not listen to any music with cursing in it. And if they don't want to, like that's fine. But they'll watch Netflix shows that have killing, cursing, sex, Squid Games, blood gushing, whatever it was. Or other people who will like read books, watch movies, whatever it is. It just seems like I feel like when it comes to music, that entertainment medium is more scrutinized, right? And there's some people like my mom where at least she's consistent. She will only watch Christian movies. She'll only watch Christian TV, like everything. But it's really interesting that it seems like it's like, oh, like if you listen to music with cursing in it, it's bad, but we can go and watch this movie that has cursing or whatever it is. So I think that's one thing that to me is a little bit confusing. But I think more importantly, like, because it's something I really thought about because I know because the music I release is not Christian and it does have cursing in it. And I know that that could have some repercussions and it already has to a certain extent. But I feel like art is not really art unless it's authentic, right? Like as soon as, and so I don't make music and I say, I'm going to curse here. And I don't make music and I say, I'm not going to curse. There's some songs that have cursing and there's some songs that don't. But I feel like to really, at least for me, to really be an artist, I have to approach it almost like without boundaries. I almost feel like if you're a painter and it's like, okay, I want you to paint the most beautiful landscape you can possibly, but don't use green, don't use red, don't use like right then, I feel like you're almost like stifling the approach to art. And so for me, I look at it, and then this might be a little bit of a controversial hot take, but I don't think that cursing is like inherently a sin, or even if you take it outside of the religious scope, like it's inherently like a immoral thing. I think it really depends on the context. And if you listen to my songs, I'm never like, F the ops or something like that. Like it's me expressing something and that's just how it came out naturally. That's how I was feeling. And I wonder if there's some people, whether it's from the Bible or other places, where if we were there in that time, the language that they use, I wonder if it would have been something we would have approved of, you
Mm.
know? So I'm not advocating for it at all. I'm not one of those people that says you should curse, cursing's okay, like go ahead and do it. But I'm also not one of those people that condemns it all. I think the context really matters. And I think also like, personal conviction. And for me, I feel like whether it's making my own music or even listening to songs like Kendrick, like that's his truth, especially someone like him who's not Christian, as far as I know, like he's not in that context. Like this is him being honest. And sometimes we're so hyper focused on like the little details of like, oh, he said a bad word that you're missing the whole message of this man pouring out his heart because he said a
Mm.
word that offended you.
Mm. Yeah, I think you make some good points. And certainly, uh, if we understood scripture, I think, if we were fluent in ancient Hebrew and Koine Greek, right, we might be a little bit surprised by some of the language that's used there. There's certainly some elements of passages, if we're honest, we don't want to share in front of children, right? We wouldn't see it as appropriate. So there definitely is some precedent for intentionality of language, even if it is harsh language. Um, and yeah, I think what you said about your mom is important too, right? Like at least you're consistent. If you're gonna be saying something about one medium, then you might as well go ahead and include everything else and be consistent in your principles. And a lot of people really are not. They don't think about it necessarily on that level. Side note, I remember I grew up very sheltered for some part of my life. Homeschooled, much like you,
Mm.
dorky, much like you, that sort of
Chill,
thing.
chill.
Uh, Bro, I remember one time we went over to someone's house, and this is a deep cut, but my old school youth group people will get this one. And if you guys don't know this song, go back and listen to it. But I went up to my sister's friend's room, and he was playing Jars of Clay, the song Flood. And I remember hearing Flood and thinking, this is evil, right? Like because of the way that I'd been taught. Like if you didn't listen to Michael Card and hymns, right, you probably weren't going to heaven. And so I heard Flood, which is a really like it's a cool song. That album is now one of my favorite Christian albums of all time. It's so well put together. But I heard that song and I'm like, I'm gonna get in trouble just by being in this room and hearing Flood by Jars of Clay. This is the worst stuff alive.
What's funny
And
is that when you
I think
started
it's
telling
hilarious.
this
You guys should.
story, when you started telling this story and you said jars of clay, I was like, I swear to God, he better not say that it was flood. Like he better not have walked into the room
It's
and
flood.
there I was like, it
Oh
better
yeah,
not have,
bro.
and then you were like, it was flood. And I was just like, oh my freaking,
Yep.
how old were you when
Yep.
this happened?
Oh man, I mean, I don't know. I was little. I was probably under 10, I would imagine. Um, but
I gotta
it was
hear
like
this song.
when it first came out, and it was like a big deal, and it like was revolutionizing Christian music at the time. And I'm like, this is so bad. I'm in so much trouble. And it does speak to this idea though, right? Like so much of our what we think is appropriate and inappropriate is determined by how we were raised or what was presented to us as right and wrong. And that is different for different people. And we do need to acknowledge that. And it's okay to have different levels of like what might violate our conscience, right? And if it does violate your conscience, you should not go against that. But it might look differently. Like for me, Flood violated my conscience at my little like 8-year old brain. Now Flood is a beautiful song. That is a like it's a worship song. So anyway, that's my little goofy diatribe on this. I think that we do need to think a little bit deeper than we usually do.
No, I
Hmm.
think that your story, especially for people who grew up in the church, your story is probably more relatable than a lot of people would want to admit. It might not have been flood by jars of clay, but I feel like a lot of people who grow up in the church have a moment, whether it's in the church or outside of the church, where you're exposed to like other people who are quote good people and they're just doing something that to you is like bad, and then you sit there and you're like, but this is a good person, but they're
Hmm.
doing this thing that I thought was bad. It's like the first
Right.
time you like the first time you hear your teacher's curse or something and you're like because you're
Hmm.
like, but we're not allowed to do that, like we can't do that, and your teacher's like, but I'm not you, and there's no, and you're, and so like it kind of breaks your brain because you're like, so is it bad to do that or not? Well, the teacher's, he's
Yeah.
like, this teacher's not a bad person, and they did it. So what is that? It's like for me, as someone who grew up religious, with the whole like just using the music thing more specifically as an example, I remember when my friends went through that phase of like it's wrong to listen uh to music that isn't Christian or music that has like worldly lyrics in it. And when they went through that phase, I was like, man, y'all so dumb. Like y'all in the gym listening to like Vivaldi, like what are we doing? This is so dumb. So I was like,
You're going with the Puritan
y'all
singers.
can keep that. Yeah, I know. They were there with like freaking like a didgeridoo playing in the background, and I was like, okay, guy, like so the didgeridoo is fine, but the moment someone starts singing along with the didgeridoo, that's a weird place to draw the line. But all right. So I didn't say
Wow.
anything. I was like, okay, y'all want to do that, go for it. But then like 6 months or like a year went by and I saw them again and they all very quietly had just gone back to listening to regular music. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like, if it's bad, it's bad. If it's not bad, do you see what I'm saying? So, like, for me, I think what happens sometimes is like we major in minors so much. Like we listen to the song and we go, "Oh, well, the song had a bad word in it, so that's bad." And it's like, what? You only heard one word in the whole song? Like you didn't hear anything else this dude said? Or like if the person is singing on stage and they're like, "Oh, well, the bass guitar was too loud." I'm like, "I'm sorry, that wasn't a bass guitar that was singing. It was a person, like someone's wife, someone's daughter, someone's sister got up there and she was singing a song from her childhood and you were mad because one of the instruments was too loud. Like, that's not her fault. Like, are you mad at the guy who didn't balance the song correctly? Or are you saying that there's something wrong with the song? And like 9 times out of 10, they're saying that there's something wrong with the song and the song is bad. So, like, for me, I feel like music, for whatever reason, has a way of like bringing that out of people, like in the way that it brought it out of 8 year old James. But 8 year old James is 8 years old. So it's like, okay, dude, like you're 8 years old. It's all right. But like, you were saying that people are giving you grief for making music that has swear words in it. It's like, are those the only words in the song? Like, I made a
Yeah.
song and it only has swear. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, that's why it's frustrating to me because it's like this is only a problem in the Christian church. Like, if you make music and you show it to your friends, who are not Christians, they're either gonna like it or they're not gonna like it. But they're not gonna go, well, this is good, but it has swear words in it, so I can't listen. Like no one's gonna say that, you
Yeah.
know? This is like a
Hmm.
uniquely
Well,
Christian problem, and it just like it frustrates me that like we get so fixated on like little things that we miss the big picture, and that's like a microcosm of like what I feel like I do a lot of times as a Christian, and what a lot of Christians do as well.
yeah, I think that when we're comfortable in our lives, we pick on the big things. But when we have to deal with hard times, things
Mm.
change. And speaking of Paramore, see what
What
I
a
did
what a
there? That was pretty good.
I'm leaving that in. That was nice. I got
Oh
like I
man.
segue.
totally got like lost in the weeds. I was like rant
For
like
real. I was
shouting at the
locked in.
cloud. I'm like shouting at the clouds like this is what's wrong with the world. And James like and like shifted the gear and brought it back. That was
Man,
really
I
good.
you gotta master the segue, man. You
No,
gotta master the
that was
segue.
good. That was good. So okay, all
That
right,
basketball second.
all right, all right. Ringmaster, what's that last song? Bring us in.
So let me just say, I've been rocking with Paramore since Haley was like 15. I think that's when she first came out, whatever. But like Paramore, I don't know if this is another one where no, you said you actually are a fan of Paramore. So
I
because you
am.
said Linkin Park. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Because Haley, the lead singer, I mentioned this in when we did my songs. Her favorite band is my favorite band. Um, and so
Literally,
I
your
have
celebrity,
immense.
celebrity, your favorite artist's favorite artist. James was like flexing.
That's
He
it.
was like, "Me Without
That's it.
You is your favorite band's favorite band." And if you've
My
never heard
favorite
of them,
Yeah,
artist
it's
went
because you're not
from
cultured enough.
that's exactly what I said. So no, I really dig Paramore. I dig how much growth they've had as a band and she's had as a writer and singer. Total side note, I just want to flex, which is not a flex at all, but I have nothing else to flex on. My friend is her neighbor. So like I kind of know people, is what I'm trying to say. Um, so
that's a
Haley, if
bigger
you're out
flex
there,
than my Madison Ryan word shirt. I'd rather that.
yeah, no, it's a pretty good flex. I'm trying to be fake humble, but it's a pretty good flex.
I mean,
Anyway, why do you like Paramore, and what about this song in particular? Uh, because yeah, this is one of their well, I would say one of their newer tracks, right? Compared to they've been around for like 20 years now. This is one of the ones in the last 5 years or so. So what
is
stood out
it?
to you about this
Yeah,
one?
I would say it's like 7 years or something like that. But Paramore's been around forever, so in that sense, it is kind of new. But yeah, sorry. Also, one other thing, just to add on to James's questions, did you discover the song when it was new, or did you find it like later on?
So to answer that question first, I did. I discovered the song when that album first came out. A lot of the music that I first started listening to was whatever was on my sister's iPod back in the days. So like on her iPod, whatever she was using, LimeWire or whatever she used, I would just listen to like because this is like the old Paramore and Alicia Keys and like these random stuff that I had no idea. But that's the only way I was able to listen to music. And so that's kind of how I discovered Paramore. And then as I got older, I started listening on my own. But the reason why I chose this song particularly, and I feel like for the most part, Paramore, I like them just mostly like I like the way it sounded. It wasn't super deep. Like I was just a really big fan of the music that they made. I think it wasn't until this album specifically where I really connected to it, to a lot of the songs they made. This one specifically, because again, like the other songs on my list, I really related to the lyrics. And I feel like the pattern that I'm seeing here is like a lot of times I felt like there were certain things I couldn't say. Either like I felt like it was too taboo, or I felt like I didn't have the words to express it. And even now, with whether it's the music I listen to or the music I make, I feel like when it comes to music, it's almost like, and not to say this in like an arrogant way or something, but it's like I become more emotionally intelligent. It's like I don't know how to say my feelings, I don't know how to express deep things, but then it's like music is a way where it's like all of a sudden I'm able to do that. Or when I hear other people do it, and it's like, wait, you're not allowed to say like all I want is to wake up fine and I want to crawl in
Mhm.
a hole in the ground. Like these stuff you can't say in a regular conversation, but if you put it in music, all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're listening to it. And I think another thing specifically about this song and about the majority of this album, After Laughter, is to me, it did a concept that I found like really genius that I didn't know at the time, where it basically has songs where the lyrics are very like kind of like dark and depressing, but they're on these like poppy, upbeat, high
Hmm.
tempo beats. And it was like, bruh, this album is
Hmm.
mirroring my life. It's like
Yeah.
on the inside, it's like I feel this way, I feel down, I feel depressed, I feel all this, but it's like I just hide it behind a smile. I just hide it behind even like in the Kendrick Lamar song when he's like, I'm the whole thing about putting on a mask. And so
Mm.
I felt that that was really genius, even with the name of the album, like After Laughter, like you laugh at something and there's that little awkward moment after, and it's like that's the space that she was living or that they were living in. And so I really felt like that was genius of having that like representation of real life of disguising the way you really feel over optimism.
They are the ultimate millennial band because they're all about, hey, let's dance because we're miserable, because we hate our lives and everything's fun. Right? And like they have it literally a song where you're dancing along and it's this is why I don't leave the house, right? Um, True millennial vibes, even though you're not a millennial yourself. But yeah, I like that you're bringing out that there is a real theme to all of these songs, right? This idea that people are putting words that you thought were not allowed to be said, putting them to music and saying it, and you're like, okay, now I have permission to be genuine too. And yeah, I just think that's really a powerful statement, and it sounds like a really an area that you've been growing in for a long time now of being your own authentic person, regardless of other people's perspectives of you and perceptions of you. And it sounds like this song kind of is in that same lane.
Yeah, no, it is. And even my sister, one time she asked me when we were having a conversation about like, oh, like, if you curse in your music and people hear it or whatever, about, she's like, why can't you just, make music without cursing? Especially because like you don't really curse in real life that often. And like most people who know me, I don't, unless, the basketball court, I don't know how much we're including that. But and my response to her was kind of like, when it comes to the music, it's like that's when I'm actually allowed to. Like, I feel like this all the time. Like, if I'm having a certain emotion, like the way I would want to express it is with this strong language, but I feel like I can't do it in front of y'all. I feel like I have to wear this mask and say it appropriately and whatever it is and put a positive spin. But when it comes to the music, like and so some people might think like, oh, like with this music is when you're just trying to, I don't know, make it in a certain way. Like, why can't you just take that out? But it's like, actually, this is the authentic version. And that's how I feel, with all these songs on the list, and especially like with this one.
I was
Awesome.
listening to the list. I got to this song last and I was like, "Oh, this song is different from all the other ones. This song is," and I'm like listening to the song, and then she started singing, and I was like, "Oh, never mind. Okay, it's just like the other
Oh,
ones."
nope.
Because like the track is
You
so
had me in the
happy.
first half.
Yeah, the track is so happy, and I was like, this is not like I don't know a lot about Paramore. This is not what I was expecting. And then she started singing, and I started hearing what she was saying. I was like, never mind, this is fine. This is exactly what I was expecting, and this fits very well with the rest of the list. Why don't we give this a listen and then we can keep discussing it? This is Hard Times by Paramore. Last one. Go down to the description and click the link to listen to Hard Times by Paramore. That was Hard Times by Paramore. Quickly, this is the second song in my life I've ever heard by Paramore. The only other song I'd ever heard by Paramore was The Only Exception, and it was a song someone did it my senior year at the senior banquet. And I remember my only experience with that song is like this was the song that played as I almost fell to my death from the top of the gymnasium where I was like hanging
What
decorations. I was
what a
like,
song to die to.
yeah, I was like,
Real,
this is,
bro.
I was like, this is horrible. Like, I was the lightest person, so my friend held the ladder, and I went like 45 feet up in the air. And my classmates came in, and I was like, "Yo, are you guys here to help us decorate?" They were like, "No, we're here to practice for the banquet." So the guys play the guitar, and she's up there. You are the only exception, and I'm looking down at these. I'm like, "You idiots can't come over here and help. I'm gonna die." And the last thing I'm gonna hear is you singing this stupid song. So that was the only song I knew by Paramore at all. So like when I heard this song, the opening, I was like, this is very different than the one other song I'd ever heard by Paramore. But you're saying, James, that this is like totally on brand for them.
Very much so. And actually, you just reminded me. I would say Paramore has the most toxic and most meaningful love songs simultaneously. Misery Business is the one they kind of got famous for, and it's all about like just flaunting the fact that I stole your boyfriend, right? And like you're a terrible person. You're also, by the way, ugly, right? Like that's basically the song. And it came out I think when she was like 18 or something like that. And then I think she's gone on record by saying like, yeah, I kind of regret that song now. Um, and then she has this other song called Still Into You, which is, I think, just a beautiful song about having love over a long period of time. After all of this time, I'm still into you. But yes, in between those bookends of music, a lot of their stuff is very much like tongue in cheek, upbeat, but the lyrics are actually a bit of a downer or a little bit more raw, more real. And so this is very much their style, and I love it personally. I think they're a great band. Um, we're obviously coming to the end of our time with this last song, but how do you like the song is all about hard times, and we've talked about some of the hard times you've been through. Like, how are you finding ways to be resilient after all of the stuff you've been through? You've been open and raw about, some mental health issues, actually going and being hospitalized, reaching out to a suicide hotline, right? Like, there's other things that you're dealing with, wrestling with faith. You've been through some hard times, and I don't know, maybe you're still going through some hard times. How are you finding your way through it? With everything going on in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that helps me is just keeping in mind that this is part of the story, but this isn't the story, right? And like even like because it was just the 5 songs, we're talking about songs individually, but all those songs are part of albums. And like even with the hard time songs, like there's songs where like, hard times and other ones that it might be like more dark and all this. But then there's another song on that album called 26. And it's literally Haley referencing an older song they made called Brick by Boring Brick. And in Brick by Boring Brick, she's literally saying like, keep your feet on the ground, don't be too caught up in like hope and whatever, like be realistic about life. And literally in 26, she's responding to it and saying like, wasn't I the one who said to keep your feet on the ground, but actually you should hold on to hope if you got it. Like don't let it go for anyone. It's actually good to be. And so I think the thing that helps me, when I listen to these songs and just in life going through, like the song title says, like hard times, is knowing that like this is a part of the story, but it's not the whole thing. And the only way for me to continue writing the story is for me to be honest about this chapter. Like I don't think you can skip over chapters. And even like I was reading in this one book, and I don't remember the book. Mello, you might know because I think you maybe even suggested it to me. But it was basically saying something about like a lot of people do certain things to like suppress negative feelings. But the way that feelings and emotions work is that you can't selectively suppress feelings. Like you can't just suppress negative ones. If you're suppressing feelings, then you're suppressing your ability to feel positive and negative ones.
Mm.
And I feel like sometimes we try to do that in life. Like, I'm only going to talk about the chapters. I'm only going to write the parts of the story that are good. But I feel like, and honestly, this is a hope because I don't feel like I can look back and be like, I've reached like the climax of the testimony. But it's hope that if I can be honest about this chapter and take off the mask and whatever consequence it might bring, be true about where I'm at in life and express that, then when I do reach that positive point or when I do reach that breakthrough, that'll be an honest breakthrough and not a manufactured breakthrough for the sake of putting a positive spin or something.
Mm. Bro, I think there's going to be a lot of people that really resound with what you've been saying, and I appreciate your authenticity just in this conversation. I hope people have stuck around to hear it because I think there's some really valuable gems you've been dropping throughout this time. As we close, I wanted to give you 30 seconds. Do you want to say anything, plug anything? What's your final word?
Yeah, I mean, I think my final word would just be like music has been such a beneficial outlet for me, both listening to it and writing it and making it. And I just want to encourage you, whether that's music or anything else, like to whatever you're feeling, even if it's taboo or even if there's shame attached to it, like I just really want to heavily encourage you to find an outlet find a way to express it, find a way to share it, because you'll be surprised that you're not alone. There's other people who feel it, and it just makes the weight so much less heavy when you're able to be honest about where you're at and what you feel.
Beautiful. Check him out if you want to, Michael Cuke on Spotify. He's going to be dropping a new track anytime now. Actually, before this gets released, he'll have dropped another one. And thank you guys for listening. I'm James.
I'm Jerome.
And I'm Michael. Thanks for listening to my Life Tracks.